Israel can carry out another provocation at any given time. Rival party lawmakers quoted the National Intelligence Service as saying Pyongyang is ready for a nuke test at Tunnel 3 of its Punggye-ri site, while Tunnel 4 is currently under construction. The NIS also noted the regime could begin reprocessing spent fuel rods at its Yongbyon nuclear complex late this year. The intel agency also highlighted the possibility of additional missile launches as active movements of vehicles have been detected at the missile research facility in Pyongyang. The NIS added the Hermit Kingdom is expected to continue its nuke tests and step up efforts to miniaturize and diversify its warheads. It's also reporting North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un reinforced surveillance of the regime's top officials and appears to have resumed public executions.
12-day Asia tour kicked off in Japan. Trump is meeting with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Sunday as he hopes to, quote, reaffirm the U.S.-Japan alliance as a cornerstone for regional peace and security. The two leaders' schedule includes a round of golf, a bilateral summit, and meeting with the families of Japanese citizens abducted by North Korea. They'll hold a joint conference scheduled on Monday. During his stay, Trump is also addressing U.S. and Japanese troops to stress the importance of the allies' cooperation amid increasing threats from North Korea. Pyongyang's latest provocations included a 6th nuclear test and a ballistic missile launch in September, the second time the North has launched a missile over Japanese territory. Experts say there's a possibility of more provocations while Trump is in Asia. After wrapping things up in Tokyo on Tuesday, Trump will fly to Seoul to meet with South Korean President Moon Jae-in. Among the top items on their agenda as well will likely be tougher sanctions against the North. While U.S. officials have spoken of military options, ahead of Trump's visit, his national security advisor did emphasize that Washington has not given up on seeking a diplomatic solution to the North Korea crisis.
North Korea possibly making new preparations for war by simulating attack responses. State media in North Korea reporting that citizens are having rare blackout exercises and mass evacuation drills. Meanwhile, the U.S. flew a nuclear-capable B-2 stealth bomber over the Pacific this weekend in that region, just days ahead of the president's visit to Asia.
At a joint news conference in Tokyo on Monday, U.S. President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe reaffirmed their policies towards North Korea.
The regime continued development of its unlawful weapons programs, including its illegal nuclear tests and outrageous launches of ballistic missiles directly over Japanese territory, are a threat to the civilized world and international peace and stability. We will not stand for that. The era of strategic patience is over.
Japanese Prime Minister Abe said North Korea had dominated their talks and that he and President Trump were both completely on the same page. Abe reiterated that now is not the time for dialogue but time to maximize pressure on North Korea, as in Japan's new sanctions that will freeze the assets of 35 North Korean groups and individuals. When President Trump arrives in South Korea on Tuesday, he will likely be looking to strengthen Washington's alliance with Seoul and reaffirm their joint push to maximize pressure on North Korea over its nuclear and missile programs. President Moon Jae-in still favors dialogue as the way to defuse nuclear tensions on the peninsula and rules out any military options against Pyongyang. Renegotiating the bilateral free trade agreement with Seoul and Washington will likely be on the agenda, as Trump has criticized the deal as the cause of the U.S. trade deficit with South Korea.
Blunt new assessment, the Pentagon warns Congress the only way to secure and eliminate North Korea's nuclear weapons located in deeply buried underground facilities would be to use U.S. troops to conduct a ground invasion.
It is the most bleak assessment. I've spent a lot of time reading the intelligence. I've had an opportunity to discuss the situation with Secretary Mattis. I believe that an outbreak of war would kill hundreds of thousands of people.
According to the letter penned by Rear Admiral Michael Dumont, Vice Director of the Pentagon's Joint Staff, and obtained by the Washington Post, North Korea's response would likely include the use of biological weapons and a long-standing chemical weapons program with the capability to produce nerve, blister, blood, and choking agents. 16 lawmakers, led by Congressman Ted Lieu of California and Ruben Gallego of Arizona, all military veterans and all but one a Democrat, signed a letter urging President Trump to stop making provocative statements that undermine diplomacy.
The president decided one day to tweet out that that was a waste of time.
The U.S. military has 375,000 U.S. military personnel under its Pacific Command, 200 warships, 5 aircraft carrier strike groups. The U.S. Army has 28,500 troops at 6 bases in South Korea. Its motto, ready to fight tonight. The U.S. Air Force keeps F-16s on strip alert there to launch at a moment's notice. 50,000 American sailors and Marines are based in Japan. The Air Force recently announced it would deploy F-35 Joint Strike Fighters to Japan for the first time. 7,000 U.S. troops are based in Guam, along with U.S. fast attack submarines and a new rotation of 6 B-1 supersonic strategic bombers, which conducted a training mission near North Korea last month.
We dominate the sky. We dominate the sea. We dominate the land and space.
But on Capitol Hill this week, a North Korean diplomat who defected last year had the following warning.
Frankly, Kim Jong-un is not fully aware of the strength and might of American military power.
The Moon Jae-in administration unveiled its first unilateral sanctions against North Korea over the regime's nuclear and missile provocations. A foreign ministry official said Monday that 18 individuals who represent North Korean banks overseas have been blacklisted as they were involved in supplying money needed to develop weapons of mass destruction. The list includes the heads and executives of North Korean banks stationed in China, Russia and Libya. The sanctions will freeze the assets of the targeted individuals within South Korea's jurisdiction and ban any of their transactions with South Korean banks. However, the measures are being seen more as symbolic rather than having any practical effect. All transactions between the two Koreas have already been cut since 2010 with the implementation of the May 24th sanctions. The banks involved are already on the UN sanctions blacklist, and the individuals named were also on America's unilateral sanctions list announced in September.
For Seoul, there are largely 2 aims with these sanctions. The first is to send a message that we do not accept North Korea developing and acquiring nuclear weapons. The second is to show solidarity with the U.S. by following their unilateral sanctions with our own.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has seemingly shifted his focus back on the economy, carrying out inspections of the country's manufacturing facilities. It's a notable change in Kim's routine, whose public appearances were mostly reserved for military drills and parades in recent months. Pyongyang state media showed the leader touring a vehicle assembly line just 10 days after he was seen visiting a cosmetics factory.
Our leader was happy that these large trucks are being manufactured with the technology and skill of our own workforce.
The key message of Kim's visits was that of economic self-reliance and homegrown production of manufactured goods. The regime could be feeling the heat as mounting international sanctions continue to loom heavy over the country's economic outlook. South Korea's National Intelligence Service says North Korea's economy may be on the brink of disaster, on a scale not seen since its economic crisis and famine in the 1990s. It estimates North Korea's GDP, which grew 3.9% last year, could post a negative growth rate as high as 5% next year if sanctions are properly implemented. Although Pyongyang has given no indication of giving up its weapons program anytime soon, experts believe it may show some signs of cooperation, at least on the surface level, to ease sanctions pressure on the regime. Yoo Jun-hee, Arirang News.
Donald Trump has worked to nurture relationships on U.S. soil with Chinese President Xi and Japanese Prime Minister Abe, with dinners at Mar-a-Lago, even rounds of golf.
President Trump for the birdie.
Now, Trump's headed for his first trip as president to Asia. It's a 12-day tour to visit Japan, South Korea, China, Vietnam, and the Philippines. And given Trump's inconsistent stance on foreign policy issues, no one's quite sure what to expect.
They will be met with fire, fury, and frankly, power.
Looming over the visit is Trump's brazen rhetoric with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Trump's escalated the crisis and raised fears even the smallest miscalculation on both sides could lead to war. Unlike the trip in the spring by U.S. Vice President Pence, White House officials say Trump will not visit the South Korean side of the demilitarized zone overlooking North Korea.